Hello, friends. Thank you for always following these videos. I just request you to share the link with your colleagues, the medical students, and all those people who may be in the field so that they can get refreshment of the knowledge they studied. As for today, we are going to look at malaria, and these are the objectives that we are going to handle in this video. The first one is definition of malaria. We're going to look at the species of malaria parasites. Then we shall look at the mode of transmission. And lastly, we shall look at the life cycle of malaria. So, what is malaria? We say malaria is an acute, febrile, infectious parasitic disease caused by protozoa called Plasmodium and is normally transmitted from person to person by female mosquitoes of the genus Anopheles. Malaria, acute febrile parasitic disease that is caused by the protozoa. This protozoa is normally transmitted from person to person by a female mosquito of genus Anopheles, commonly characterized by chills, fever, pain, and sweating. So when a client appears with febrile disease of acute onset, and when we find that it's a Plasmodium and can be transmitted from person to person. And these are some of the cardinal signs: chills, fevers, pain, and sweating. Then we say the client has malaria. What are the 5 species of malaria? Ideally, there have been 4 species of malaria parasites. But in this case, there is one additional one which has just been newly identified. So, majorly, you have known that there are only 4 species of malaria parasites, but in this video, we're going to know the 5th one. So the first one is Plasmodium falciparum, and this causes almost 99 cases of malaria that we have. They are all caused by Plasmodium falciparum. Then we also have Plasmodium vivax, Plasmodium malariae, there is Plasmodium ovale, and the 5th one is Plasmodium novelis. This is the one which is just newly discovered to be causing malaria. Then, how is malaria transmitted? We are looking at the mode of spread or mode of transmission. How does someone contract malaria? What happens? We are saying Plasmodia are transmitted from human to human following a bite by an infected female Anopheles mosquito. So ideally, many people will get malaria when they have been bitten by an infected female Anopheles mosquito. But other than this mode of transmission, there are other ways how people are going to get malaria or how malaria is transmitted. What are those? One is through blood transfusion. If a patient is given blood of a client who previously had contracted malaria parasites, but they had not caused the malaria in that client, still the stage of malaria will continue this client and he will eventually develop malaria despite not being bitten by the mosquito. Same to organ transplant. These organs will move with some content of blood in them. Then there is transplacental, and that's when we say mother to child. If a mother suffers malaria, high chances that these malaria parasites are going to cross the placenta barrier and cause malaria to the child. Then lastly, we are saying through sharing contaminated needles, for example, intravenous drug users. We have people who abuse narcotics, especially heroin, pethidine, and tramadol. And you'll find these people sharing the same syringe, trying to inject themselves this drug of abuse. And in so doing, the content of blood that is being carried on this needle can eventually introduce the malaria parasite into the other person and can end up getting malaria. So these are the 5 modes of transmission of malaria. 1, infected female Anopheles mosquito bites a human being through blood transfusion, organ transplant, then transplacental, that's mother to child, and lastly, sharing contaminated needles. So as we saw, the last objective is to look at the life cycle of malaria. And here the life cycle of malaria happens in a human being. We have a human stage, and also we have a mosquito stage. So we are going to first explain the human stage. Infected female mosquito bites a human being. So whoever the mosquito is, which is already infected, will bite a human being. After biting this human being, it injects Plasmodium parasites in form of sporozoites into the blood stream. So these parasites that are in the form of sporozoites that have been injected into the bloodstream are going to move quickly to the human liver in half an hour. Now these sporozoites are in the liver. So in the liver, they undergo the first phase of multiplication, which we call exoerythrocytic phase. That's the first phase of multiplication these sporozoites undergo. Now, when they undergo that exoerythrocytic phase, they produce asexual daughter parasites called merozoites. After producing these asexual parasites called merozoites, these parasites in the form of merozoites are released from the liver cells in vesicles. Now the liver starts to release these merozoites in form of vesicles. Now these vesicles move through the heart and arrive to the lungs, where they settle within the lung capillaries. Now the previously called sporozoites now turned into merozoites, and now they are settling within the lung capillary. So with the time, these vesicles eventually disintegrate or rupture, freeing the merozoites to enter the blood phase of their development. And this is what we call the second phase, which has the name of erythrocytic phase. Because the vesicles which have merozoites in them eventually have ruptured, and they have now released these merozoites into the blood stream. So in the blood stream, what happens with these merozoites? These merozoites invade the red blood cells and multiply again until the cell rupture. Now the merozoites are in the red blood cell, are invading in it, and eventually starts to rupture the red blood cell. So then they invade more red blood cells. Every time they invade a red blood cell, they multiply and eventually ruptures it. These other free merozoites will invade another one, multiply and rupture it, and the cycle keeps continuing of invading the red blood cells and rupturing them. So this cycle is repeated, causing fever each time parasites break free and invade the blood cell. So some of the infected blood cells leave the cycle of asexual multiplication. Some of these are going now to go to another cycle, which we call that these merozoites in these cells develop into sexual form. Remember, at first they were asexual, but now they develop into sexual form, meaning that they form male and female. And these are called gametocytes that circulate in the bloodstream. So the mosquito, which is not yet sick, which is not yet infected, will now come and bite this infected person, and it targets the gametocyte. If this stage is not yet reached, even if the mosquito bites a human being, it cannot take anything to go and cause malaria. Now we come to the mosquito stage. The mosquito will come and bite this infected human being. Remember, this is a mosquito which is not infected. So when a mosquito bites an infected human being, it injects the gametocytes, which develops further into mature sex cells called gametes. And after developing into gametes, the fertilized female gametes develop into actively moving ocnets. These gametes which are now moving, we call them ocnets, that burrow through the mosquito's midgut wall and form oocytes on the interior surface. So this ocnet will try to pass through the mosquito's midgut, and as it does that, then it forms oocytes into the exterior surface. So inside the oocyte, thousands of active sporozoites develop. The oocyte eventually ruptures, releasing sporozoites into the body cavity that travel to the mosquito's salivary gland. When this oocyte breaks, now it releases a lot of sporozoites, and they go and settle in the mosquito's salivary gland. Then here we see that the cycle is going to be continued. The cycle of human infection begins again when the mosquito bites another person. So before the mosquito bites another person, these sporozoites will be settling in the mosquito's salivary gland. And when it bites another person, the cycle continues. So briefly, you can look at this diagram that explains the life cycle of the mosquito. You see where I'm putting the cancer, this number 1. The mosquito comes and bites the person. It goes to the liver, it matures into schizoids, and this is the phase we call erythrocytic phase. Now the mature schizoids ruptures and it goes into the bloodstream. In the bloodstream, it is invading the red blood cell, and we call it this stage as erythrocytic stage. And some of them now leave this cycle of rupture in red blood cells, and they form into gametocytes, which we call them sexual. There is a mosquito which is not sick now coming to pick these gametocytes. They develop into mature gametes, develop into ocnet. Now it is trying to burrow and has formed an oocyte, and lastly it settles into the mosquito's salivary gland. And when this mosquito bites another person, the cycle continues. Thank you for listening. Share this video with a colleague, share the link with a colleague, and make sure you subscribe. Thank you so much. God bless you as you share this information with your colleagues.